Well, good morning. It's good to be here. At least see some of you. I wish we could see the whole audience, but I hope you can see us, and we're glad to be here. This panel is on police procedurals, and its title is "Do They Really Say Book 'Em, Danno?" The popular culture around police procedurals, particularly in film and television, takes a little leeway with the truth sometimes. And we've got a great panel here today to talk about that and what their experiences are, and hopefully give a little bit more light to this subject. I'm Jim Latwell. I'll be your moderator for today's panel. And just a quick thing of my background. I worked in the prison system for 29 years. Since this was my office in the background here. Was an associate warden at a max prison. Was director of California State Parole when I retired. But we have a really great panel here for you today to talk about all aspects of the police procedural writing business. And let me just give you a quick introduction. Alphabetically here, Frankie Y. Bailey is a criminal justice professor specializing in crime history, crime, and mass media popular culture. Her mystery series features crime historian Lizzie Stewart, and her police procedural novels feature police detective Hannah McCabe. Frankie is a past executive vice president of MWA and a past president of Sisters in Crime. Welcome, Frankie. Good to have you here.
Thanks. Looking forward to this.
Our next panelist is Robin Burcell. Robin moonlighted as a cop for nearly 3 decades while working as a mom full-time. She wrote police procedurals and international thrillers until Clive Cussler asked her to co-write with him in the New York Times best-selling Fargo series, where the good guys sometimes skirt the law, but always save the day. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you.
And then we have Marianne Miller. Marianne writes the Seasons mystery series, once sang all 20 verses of the Ballad of Davy Crockett for a talent show, and despite the booze, thought she would grow up to be a rich and famous singer. She was 10. When she was 12, she won a Scholastic Writing Award contest and thought she'd grow up to be a rich and famous writer. She gave up the singing career and is still working on the rich and famous writing career. In addition to the Season series, which debuted with Open Season, followed by Stalking Season, and the just released Desperate Season, she's written 2 standalone mysteries and a suspense novel, as well as other books and short stories. Welcome, Marianne.
Hey, everyone. Thank you.
And we have Terry Shepard. Terry wrote 6 nonfiction books before crafting his first thriller, Chasing Vega, in 2019. He began writing detective fiction for kids after his grandson asked if he had a real job, and took a brief detour this summer, offering the Mystery Bug series, teaching kids about masking and social distancing in the poetic style of Dr. Seuss. There, good plug, Terry. He's had careers as a corporate executive, entrepreneur, an academic, and a broadcaster. He's skydived with the Army Golden Knights, flies airplanes, and is currently involved in the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine trial. Thank you, Terry. Terry's in the final throes of completing Chasing the Captain, which will take his Latina detective, Jessica Ramirez, to London sometime in early 2021. Welcome, Terry. Good to see you here. We've got a number of things to kind of talk about in the police procedural realm, but kind of taking the title of the panel, do they really say that? I think we all have pet peeves on things we run across, particularly in film and television, that kind of get under our skin. I know Robin wrote an excellent blog post about that subject, and why don't we start with Robin? What are your pet peeves in crime fiction?
Oh my gosh. What isn't? No, you know what? For me, it's probably easier to say what do I like, and what I like is a compelling story, because you'll always hear, interview half a dozen cop writers, cops who also write books, and they'll say, oh my gosh, I hate it when they get the gun wrong. They put a safety on a Glock, or, those gun issues. And I listened to, I think it was Lee Child on a panel decades ago, and somebody told me, oh, I hate Lee Child because he put a safety on a Glock. And so I'm reading Lee, and it's like, this guy tells this great story, and clearly everybody loves these stories because he's obviously popular for a reason. So does it really matter if you put a safety on a Glock? Well, I guess if you're a cop and you're looking for those cop mistakes, then yes, it matters. But if you are a reader, the most important thing is to make your cops on the surface believable, and even in their thoughts and that sort of thing. So my pet peeve would really be, don't make your cops cardboard characters.
Very good. You have a background that's kind of unique among the fiction community. You've been a forensic artist. You've been a cop. You've been an investigator. Does that somehow color how you look at film and television?
Oh, absolutely. My husband actually got to the point where he said, "Would you just shut up already?" And what actually cured me from ruining good stories and that sort of thing was watching the Sixth Sense. And I was bitching about the phone call that Bruce Willis makes to whoever it was, or his, I can't remember when he says, "No, I'll handle this," instead of calling 911. And, everybody, I'm not going to spoil that story for everybody, but, I was just like, oh my gosh, da, 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 da. And then I'm watching the story. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe that, I said this. It kind of ruined it for me in a way because I sort of missed some key elements, but I'm much better now. So.
Excellent. Oh, we just had a comment from Terry Shames that said, "You've been incredibly generous in answering questions about procedural issues." So.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you, Terry, and
you.
everybody else. I actually enjoy it very much. So.
Good. Marianne, let's kind of piggyback on the same question. What kind of pet peeves do you have when you look at fiction and television and film?
When I was doing my research, I had a very good friend who was a police officer. I don't have a background in law enforcement. I just did a whole bunch of research for when I started open season. And part of the research involved going to a conference where my friend who was a police officer did a workshop on all the things that were wrong in film and television. And things like when a person was shot and they flew across the room. And he said, they don't. They drop. They don't, fly across the room. He pointed out a number of other things that we see, the big car crash where the car explodes. He said, well, they don't always explode. Occasionally there will be a fire, but they don't burst into this amazing flame that we see that's so graphically interesting, but so terribly wrong. So those are some of the things. And I kind of like Robin. I don't like the cardboard characters. I don't like the characters that are the same. The ex-cop who's got an alcohol problem, stereotypes. I've tried really hard in the season series to not make the stereotype. My Black police officer didn't come up hard and poor, and she's the one that came from middle class, and the white officer is the one that came up hard and poor. So I've tried to flip stereotypes so they're not what people would expect. Just saying, oh, a Black cop, it's got to have this type of background.
Interesting. Thank you. Frankie, what about your pet peeves?
Well, I have to agree with everything that's been said before. I like complexity in characters. And oddly enough, even though I enjoy a 60-minute crime show, I find it distressing when everything is neatly tied up in 60 minutes and people come back the next week and they never show any lasting impact of stumbling over bodies every week. And so when I was writing my characters, particularly Lizzie, she goes in to see a psychiatrist after the second body. This is, like I'm the angel of death here.
Right.
Amateur sleuths, and I have one. She is a criminal justice professor. She's aware of the fact that you just don't stumble over bodies every week. And with the police procedural, I really wanted to deal with something, a female police officer. So Hannah McCabe is reflective of the police officers that I did ride-alongs with. And so I'm trying to address that from the standpoint of a biracial female police officer and what she's dealing with and working with men and that subculture where they're sometimes marginalized.
Very good. Very important. How about you, Terry?
Well, my Latina is based on a real person. So my real person is constantly telling me, Jessica would never do that. Girl cops don't cry. We compartmentalize. And what I had to remind her was that I had readers out there, and readers want to, they like emotion. They like flaws that are out there. Mm-hmm. And so there's these two worlds. There's the world of the cops that I used to ride along with when I was in college. I worked as a DJ, and I'd get off at midnight and I'd go ride with these guys and, pull drunks over and have a great time all night with them. And then later in life, I built this network of really elite police officers who were kind of abandoned by their university and turned to me for community. And so I had all of these guys that were kind of my quality control issues. And some were exactly like what Robin was saying. Somebody was saying there's no safety on a Glock, but the others were saying, look, we want to escape from reality as much as you do. Just keep it close. And like, Frankie and Marianne said, make the story great, because I want a wild ride. I want to see the cars explode in a mushroom. I want to see the bad guys burn up in flames. I want to see
that.
all the things that never happened to me in the real world. So if I have a pet peeve, it would be with those people who are so focused on the attention to detail that they say, that thing in your ear that your cop is using, that's called a roach. And you called it an earpiece. I want you to go into your manuscript and fix that.
Yeah, Terry, you bring up really good points, because I think some of these people, because they're trying so hard, they're letting the facts get in the way of a good story. And, as readers, we just want a good story. And as writers, we obviously want a good story. And I think that's one of the lessons that I learned working with Clive Cussler, because he could take his big red pen and just X it out. And he goes, we don't need to know about this. And I said, but you can't do that because it's illegal. And he's like, I said, but I'll make it work. So
not in my world. Yeah.
Yeah. He knows what he's talking about. He's got the experience. And it took me a while I knew it before him, but I think he even honed that even more in me, that, tell us a raw and good story. I don't care if a car doesn't really explode when you shoot the back of it. If it calls for an explosion, by all means, blow up the car. So
James, how important do you think it is to have real world experience like you've had, or like Robin has had, as opposed to people like Marianne and me who are outsiders?
Well, I think it's a good question. It's so good. It's one of the ones I was going to ask you. I think it helped me. I think it gave me a shortcut from that experience. I was able to draw on some of the characters and situations that I experienced in almost 3 decades working in prison. But I don't think it's necessarily a have to have. I mean, there are some fantastic crime writers out there and procedural writers who don't have that experience. The first one that comes to mind is Rachel Housel Hall. I mean, Rachel's procedural series with Lou Norton is just, it's top notch. And, I don't think that's in her background, but my God, it's a wonderful series. So I don't think it's a have to have. It's something that I think helps me. It's maybe a shortcut, but a lot of folks do research and get there.
Yeah, I think it's important for us. One advantage is that we know what the rules are, therefore we can break them. I think there may be some writers who, as we mentioned, are trying to put too much, every single police fact they've ever learned into a book. And sometimes I think it's easier for those of us who have that background, harder, because we know the rules. And in order for us to break them, we really have to make it plausible. That's my point.
Yeah, no, I've seen that. I've experienced that too. I've had to cut out, thousands of words that really didn't advance the story. They're a great detail procedurally, but who cares?
Yeah.
Something that really helped me in
Marianne, you got to really project because people are saying they can't hear you.
something that really helped me that feels so odd. I'm doing my theater voice in my office and it's bouncing off the walls. Anyway, I rode patrol with a bunch of police officers. Even before I started the season series, I was a journalist and I did some feature stories on riding with the police officers, riding with firefighters, and doing long feature articles about that. And then when I started the season series, I interviewed some police officers that my friend introduced me to. And I interviewed seasoned officers, brand new officers, detectives, brand new detectives, and just getting a sense of those people as officers, but also people, really helped me in developing the characters, because I'm not up on every single detail of being a police officer, but I'm learned enough about the characters that they became real people. I mean, the people that I interviewed became the characters that became real. It went back and forth, which was really awesome. I think it was an awesome way to learn a lot of this.
Very good. And that kind of segues into another area. I mean, procedurals are kind of uniquely placed in the fiction world to kind of capture what's happening in society. I mean, you can't look at the news without something relating to police misconduct or use of force or protests. It's out there. And what impact, we'll start with you, Frankie, what impact do you see what's happening in society having on the future of police procedurals in publishing?
Well, I can tell you what's been happening with my police procedural as I think about it. I started out writing in the near future because my city is Albany, New York, where I live. And so I wanted to be far enough in the future so I would be able to have this, bring in this kind of semi-light sci-fi vibe with this and have a kind of alternate universe thing. And the future has caught up with me. And so in my book, I'm dealing with the 2020 election. It's coming up, and I have this third-party candidate who resembles someone we may all know. And so he's supposed to be coming to Albany before the election, and I've been putting off this third book because I can't decide what to do about him. He's coming, he's going to cause trouble, but I don't want to get out ahead of the election, so I'm sort of waiting to see how that plays out. But when I set out writing that, I didn't intend to have that happen, but the future caught up with in terms of real time, so this kind of alternate universe. But one of the things that, as a criminal justice professor, I'm really concerned about, of course, is what's been going on in the streets with the Black Lives Matters movement and police officers and and these clashes that are going on between people out in the street, but particularly in terms of the narratives about it, because I look at mass media and our coverage. And so I spend a lot of time following cases as they go through the criminal justice system. And so doing that, I'm really noticing some ways in which the media is covering this, and some concerning things that are going on there, some more hopeful, but it's all in such chaos right now that it's hard to figure out, how this is going to turn out. And I'm particularly concerned about the far right groups that are becoming more and more active and using social media.
So are you making a conscious effort to include some of that narrative in your stories, or is that something you stay away from? How are you handling that?
There in the Hannah McCabe books, the first two, and it's going to be more there in the third book because of it's moving towards the election. And I can't avoid that.
Great, thank you, Terry. What about you?
Well, I'm all about suspension of belief. The biggest challenge for me in writing the follow-up to Chasing Vega is that I can't find a ticking time bomb that is compelling enough to compete with what's happening in the real world right now. I mean, that's the biggest challenge for me, is there's no story there's no thing that I can put out there that is more frightening than what we're dealing with right now in the world. So that's part of what's kind of pushed Captain back. And it was supposed to be a Christmas book, but it's going to be a first quarter book now.
Oh, yeah.
Because I need to figure out what that is. And, this is why I love being with this esteemed group right here, because I always come away with more ideas about how to make that work. And one of the things that I have learned about this, and I think maybe that I just have to accept as an author, is plug it in. Just find something that that gives your protagonist the motivation to do what she wants to do or needs to do, and don't worry so much about it. It doesn't have to be, in Vega, it was this gal that wanted to mess up the financial district in New York City to crater the American economy. Well, we've done that since this book has come out. So, I mean, that's the biggest thing is, I think it's harder for me as a writer to come up with something that is a big kind of blockbuster Star Wars type of world-changing challenge in a world that really feels in many ways like it's spinning out of control.
Good point. Robin, what about you? How much of this social justice issue do you see coming into some of your work?
Well, luckily, because I'm still currently doing the Cussler stuff, that's, this larger than life, it really doesn't involve the real world. It's just a matter of kind of what Terry was talking about, the suspension of disbelief, because there's a lot of cars that are blowing up from single shots to the back of it, that sort of thing in the Fargo series. But I do think about that a lot because I do have my own mysteries. And I think a good example, even before 2020 landed on our calendars, was this one book that I did. It was a continuation of the series that was the basis for the Streets of San Francisco TV show. And the book was called The Last Good Place. And it's put out by a small press called Brash Books. Lee Goldberg is one of the editors or publishers. And he called me up one day. This was the book I did in between my regular series and the Cussler series. And he said, hey, we want you to do this continuation of this TV series, or the books that were the basis for the Streets of San Francisco. And the books originally take place in the 70s. And so I said, oh, it's cool. I mean, we're talking a straight police procedural, but I read the first books, which were by Carolyn Weston. And as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, holy bleep, bleep, bleep. You can't do this today. You could not write those characters today, and especially now in light of 2020. They're beating confessions out of the bad guys and just doing so many things that police today would and should get in trouble for. And so I said, I'm going to have to up it to the 20th or 21st century, because these cops would end up in jail if they did stuff like this. So that's always been in the back of my mind as a law enforcement officer. And so now seeing a lot of this stuff that's going on in various cities around the world, I am at once horrified and disappointed at some of the actions of some of these law enforcement officers. And I can honestly and from the bottom of my heart say that not every cop is like some of these cops that we've seen. So it's important for me, and always has been, because this has always been an issue. It's just now 2020 into the forefront. And with social media, everybody's talking about it now. It has always been there. And so it was always important for me to present my heroes and heroine police officers as how I would handle things, and with my morals, my moral compass. And I think that would hold true if I was writing police procedurals today. So, yeah.
Thank you. Marianne, how about you? How much of the social justice conflict is coming into your work?
Well, ironically, the first season series started because I was working with some filmmakers in Dallas who wanted to do a feature film and wanted social issues to be part of it, and they asked me if I could write the screenplay. And so that's when I first started interviewing police officers, because there was a big controversy in the late 80s about the
Marianne, can you speak up, please?
about the use of deadly force in police using deadly force. And when I interviewed the police officers, that was the thing that I focused on mostly. What were their reactions to what had happened, be it the Dallas Review Board, the protests. There was a bunch of stuff kind of similar to what's going on today, was going on then. And moving fast forward to today, I wasn't sure what the next book in the season series was going to be, or if there was even going to be another book after Desperate Season. But the two gals started talking to me, and they said, you know, what's going on today, that's our story. You know, we have to rethink, like Sarah, the white cop, had to rethink her thoughts about racial injustice, because her eyes were being opened, just kind of like mine are. And then Angel actually starts joining the protests, which creates a whole bunch of problems for her in the department, because there's this yin and yang between, she's a police officer, is she police officers, or is she, you know, in the pro? So, I mean, all this stuff just started churning, and all of a sudden these gals are talking to me again, like, we're doing another book. And I said, okay. So, but I think it's important to, as writers, to speak the truth. That's part of our job, is to speak the truth. And the truth today is there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of unrest. There's a lot of things that we on both sides need to look at in terms of our behaviors and our thoughts and what we're propagating through our work and through what we do, like on social media. So that's all become very relevant to my gals and to me and to my next book. So we're churning along.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a common theme when you're writing the procedural stuff. You can't help but have some of that stuff kind of filter what you're putting on the page. There's a list of characters here that we write. Sarah Kingsley, Remy Fargo, Sidney Fitzpatrick, Lizzie Stewart, Hannah McHale, Jessica Ramirez, and Paula Newberry. These are all strong female lead characters in our books. How do you capture some of the struggles that women have in law enforcement? Because it's a very unique, very paramilitary organization. How do you see that playing out? And Terry, let's start with you and Jessica Ramirez.
Well, I created Jessica on purpose. What I really wanted to do was to wrap an ensemble cast around her of very diverse, unique people that some would consider out of the mainstream. So, you know, her partner is LGBT on the force. The medical examiner is on the autism spectrum. The guy who runs the FBI office in Flagstaff or in Arizona is African American. My goal was I really wanted to create a bunch of people that my readers would look at and say, yeah, maybe I can be that hero too. And that was my rationalization for being a white guy trying to write about people that didn't look like me. The other thing that was really a driver for me was I wanted to better understand the true life experiences of these individuals. So in the research that is necessary for a book like Chasing Vega, you really have to get very intimate with people about their backstories. And I talked to so many people and learned so much. And I think I came away from that experience, I hope, a more compassionate human being who understands the value of differences that are out there. And I hope that what came out in the book was something that was not only a story that people will get done with and saying, wow, that satisfied me, I really enjoyed the ride, but also they said, you know, he did a pretty good job of creating the authentic experience for these individuals in their own unique life stories. in the end, as authors, James, I mean, we basically put on these superhero suits of people that are not us. And our magic as the gods of our world is that we can create them in whatever way we want. But the danger is that we really have an obligation, I think, to try and be as authentic as we can about their experience, so that when someone reads that, who does have that skin color, who is on the autism spectrum, they will say, yeah, he's talking about me, and I like it.
Gotcha. Frankie, how about your characters? What makes them real in dealing with a law enforcement environment?
Well, yeah, Lizzie Stewart, I haven't mentioned John Quinn. There's a police officer in that series. And he is, I have to be honest about this. When I started out, I had this, Lizzie was supposed to be going to the small town and she was going to meet the Southern police officer. I ended up taking them on a trip to England as I was writing the book, and he morphed into something else because I needed him to be something else. I needed to get this Northern police officer down south to Virginia. And so I made him a Philadelphia police officer. Lizzie's Black. I wanted someone that she would have conflict with initially and that they would have to reach some common ground. So 5 books later they engaged, but that's another story. But so he's a white police officer. He's ex-military because I was in the Army briefly. He, when she meets him, is coming out of a really bad situation for a police officer. And he's in Cornwall, England, visiting his partner. So she spends 2 books finding out what it is that he did that was so bad that, you know, it's not something he could have helped, but you know, it's something that has really had a long-term effect on him. Hannah McCabe, when I was looking at police officers there, I took 2 examples, Hill Street Blues. I don't know if anyone remembers that show, but Hill Street Blues and Barney Miller, those very diverse police departments. That's what I was looking for when I set up, when I look at the ensemble cast for Hannah McCabe's police department.
Very interesting. Thank you, Frankie. Marianne, how about you?
When I was looking for kind of a example of good ensemble cast, I was actually reading a lot of
Lean in there, Marianne.
a lot of Ed McBain.
Thank you.
The 87th Precinct series. And that's actually what spurred my interest in police procedurals in the first place. And then watching television, like Frankie, I did Hill Street Blues, and then went to NYPD Blue and a bunch of those police ensemble cast television shows. And I got a sense of how you have your main characters who are kind of the featured, but then you have your players that surround it, and you have to make each one of those players unique and interesting. I kind of liked what Terry said about having such, for today, really diverse characters. I haven't tried that, but I may morph into something a little bit closer to that, because I have a lot of family members who are gay. I have a lot of family members who are on the spectrum. It'd be interesting to kind of pull what I've learned from them into maybe more characters in the book. But I like ensemble casts, and I like diversity in the ensemble casts.
Very well put. Thank you, Marianne. Now, Robin, your experience in making a woman officer's life real, I mean, you have some experience in that. How much of that do you incorporate in your procedural work?
I would say that played into it quite a bit. I was the first female officer for my all-white male police department. And for anybody who's been involved in law enforcement, Jim and Frankie, you guys know the good old boys and that sort of thing. And when I was hired on at this department, it was only because of my perseverance, not letting them get away with what they were trying to get away with. And they literally called me up 15 minutes before the oral board was about to leave, saying, "Oh, we just found your little postcard that they were supposed to mail to me 6 weeks ago between a file cabinet and a wall." And you can guess from there what the rest of my life was like in the beginning there. And I was also told that the only place women belong, another officer from another department told me that the chief where I was going to go work, he says, you'll never get hired there because the only place women belong are flat on their backs in bed. And I've always been the stubborn child. If you tell me I can't do something, then I'm going to do it. And so it was really the exact wrong thing for them to say and to do to me if they didn't want me to get the job, because I didn't want the job. I just did it because my friends kept saying, oh, you need to apply, you'd make a great cop, you know. So for the first 5 years, I was, you know, struggling to keep my head above water in this department where nobody wanted me. And when I started writing, it was cathartic for me. At first, I wasn't going to do it. And my first book was a romance because the last thing I wanted to do was relive on my computer was I was living in real life. And then I found that, wow, you know, I could be the boss. I can kill off, you know, that captain who said that and that officer who did this. And you know, I can actually get some payback, just change the names a little bit. And you don't go to jail for it, which is another bonus. So, so for me, it was important to put the female officer's point of view and that there is a place for us in law enforcement. And what I remember one time I arrested somebody. I was on the job for about 15 years. So I kind of made my place in my little world. There were still issues. But I arrested this one guy, pulled him over and ran him for warrants, turned out he had a warrant, and my backup arrives and he's walking behind me. So I tell this guy, you know, you're under arrest, you got a warrant, we'll go downtown, take care of it. It's just a misdemeanor, no biggie, but you'll be out in about an hour or so. And he goes, oh, okay. And he turns around and puts his hands behind his back. And as I'm cuffing him up, the officer, my backup and I look at him, I said, what's wrong with you? And he says, I've never seen anybody arrest that guy without a fight before. How did you do it? So, you know, there's still issues. There'll probably always be issues as long as the men are in charge, not you guys, of course, but that's what I wanted to bring to my work, to show that just because you guys have always done it this way does not mean there's not another better way to do something. And so when I populate my books, there's always, you know, they're the underdogs, and eventually we bring, you know, some of the other guys around to that way of thinking. So my women are strong.
Very nice.
That Robin, a colleague and I were doing some research with a police department, a large police department in upstate New York. And I did ride-alongs with the women police officers. And that was one of the things I observed about them, the way that they went about doing things. I was with a female police officer and her partner. She was a 7-year veteran. And the other police officer, also a woman, was a rookie. And so we walk into this apartment with this guy who was like huge, and he was having a mental issue, and they had been there several times before. He had aluminum foil Reynolds wrap around the ceiling. So it was really weird. And he was completely out of it because he was off his meds, and she was walking up and talking to him. And I was by the door, ready to run really fast. Her partner had her hands on her gun, and I thought, this is not going to go well. But she talked him down. They knew each other, and she got him, you know, settled down and ready to go back to the clinic. And it was great. It was brilliant.
And that's kind of some of what I've experienced is that, you know, two guys, you got the police officer and you got the bad guy, and they're puffing up their chests and doing the man-to-man, you know, thing. And you get a woman in there, and it's like, there's no doubt that this guy can kick my butt. But because I know that, I am going to do anything possible to use my voice, which is my best tool, to talk this person down, kind of what you're talking about, Frankie, and what you witnessed. Absolutely.
I noticed when I did the ride-alongs that there was a huge difference between the way the women handled some of the people that were being arrested and the way the men, like you said, Robin, the men do that junkyard bully dog thing, you know, where they're just at each other all the time. And the women tended to back off of that threatening presence and present a more reasoned, I can understand you, I can help you, I can be a bit of an advocate, even though I'm going to put handcuffs on you and take you to jail. But it's still done so much differently when a woman is doing the arresting.
Now, interestingly, I would say the most physical fights I've ever been was with another woman. So women, yeah, it's the same thing. You know, I think that puts guys at a disadvantage. When you have the bad guy with the male officer, they're already at a disadvantage. And so it takes a certain type of male officer to not do the chest puffing thing and go, you know, let me listen to what you have to say. Same thing with, you know, girl on girl. They just want to go round. It's like, I'm just here to help you, you know? So,
Yeah, first time I got my ass kicked was by a woman. Guilty. But no, there's been several instances in the prison when just being with another woman staff member, it de-escalated the situation. There wasn't that chest puffing that Robin talked about, and it just gave people just a little bit more time to think through their response, and it de-escalates.
yes.
So,
Yes.
very cool. We talked a little bit about this. I mean, aside from yourselves, of course, because you're all, you know, top notch. Who else gets it right in the crime fiction community writing about procedurals? And Marianne, we'll start with you.
Robin, of course, I've read a lot of her books, and I was honored to be compared to her in a Library Journal review of my first book. I fell off my chair. I was like, oh my God, she's my like one of my favorite authors. Evan Hunter, Ed McBain, I think he got things pretty well. I'm reading a lot more thrillers now, so I can't think of procedurals off the top of my head, but I think Kent Kruger, John Sanford, I think are getting pretty close to right. But because I don't have a background in law enforcement, I can't really spot details that may be off. You know, I get invested in the character and I go along. You know, if you give me a really, really engaging character, I can suspend a lot of my disbelief in terms of reality, in terms of facts, in terms of what the motivation, what the characters are doing and why. You know, if I'm invested in the character, I'm there for the ride.
Yeah, character.
Yeah, exactly. Frankie, how about you?
Well, yeah, I'm going to take the fifth on this because I do research on these books and I read about them. But I actually, historically, I really like Walter Mosley because he's writing with that time period I'm following. The Easy Rollins series, that was always been terrific. But with other books, I'm reading for different things, so I'm not looking as much about how they handle what's going on as and more about how they're developing the characters and the narrative that they're telling in terms of my research.
Fair enough. Terry, what favorite writers do you have out there in this genre?
Well, Wamba for sure, and then I'm a huge Lee Goldberg fan. That guy is kind of a Renaissance man. He can write in any genre. Those are the two that I really like. I wanted to share one resource for those of you. I don't know if you know about this book, Breaking and Entering by Connie Fletcher, but to talk about the female experience in law enforcement, she interviewed, this is an older book, it's been around for some time, but she interviewed a ton of people. And this was kind of my Bible. I'm listening to what Robin's saying, and I'm just feeling so much empathy for her experience because it's Tracy Ruiz, on whom Jessica Ramirez is based, had exactly the same experience that Robin did. Everything from this magic of females being able to de-escalate with males and always getting to fist fights with other women. You know, that kind of stuff is real out there. And I think it makes, not only for the authenticity of our work, but it's also fun. It's fun to try and create, especially in dialogue, the dynamic between these people. And Wamba's great at it. You know, he can say in a few words so much. And then Lee Goldberg has had so much experience across so many different platforms, you know, creating Monk and Spencer for Hire and being involved in so many different things. And he writes so tight. That's the other thing I like about him is his stuff is incredibly tight. It's authentic, but it's also a very quick read. It's that potato chip that you want to just digest, and you know, it tastes good while you have it, but you want to have a little bit more when you're done. So
Right.
those are the guys that I think I turn to when I'm trying to imagine myself in that space.
Very good. Robin, how about your some of your favorites in the genre?
Well, back in the day, when I first started, you know, obviously Joe Wamba and Michael Connolly, Robert Crace, you know, those were the guys who were the stars when I first started writing police procedurals. And actually Patricia Cornwell, I don't think she should be ignored because she really made it seem very, very realistic, even though I think in later books, her first ones were fantastic. Later books, she got a little weird. I think, I don't know if it's true, but it seemed to me like she was projecting her personal life into her characters, which we all tend to do. But it was like, if that's the case, then her life was a mess. I don't know. And then the TV shows, David Simon's Homicide, Life on the Streets, and his, God, what's the other one he did? My mind's just gone blank. And you know, all the shows that he does. And so, but interestingly, these guys are good because, and I think Marianne's touched on this so much during this conversation. It's about the characters, okay? And none of these authors are letting the facts get in the way of a good story. And I think I talked to you about this once, Jim, about my second police procedural. It was in the Kate Gillespie San Francisco PD homicide series. The first one is Every Move She Makes, and the second one, Fatal Truth. The review from Publishers Weekly said something like nonstop action thrills and filled with lots of police lingo. And you know, I'm looking at this review going, oh, this is really cool. But the truth is that you know, I probably used police lingo about 4 times in the entire book. And so what all these authors that everybody is mentioning that we've seen either on TV or on the page, what they have that some other writers don't have is they know when to throw in that occasional police lingo in there and make sure that, as Marianne stressed several times, the motivation for your characters is proper. Then you are going to have a rollicking good story. But if you are trying to write this, you know, this homicide story and, you know, get that police stuff, every single little thing, here's the scoop, you guys. Real police work is probably 90% sitting under the tree writing a report, or at your desk writing the report, or testifying in court, you know, about the report you spent 90% of your career writing, and 10% of the shit hitting the fan. And sometimes for probably 95% of those officers, when the shit hits the fan, they're not killing anybody. They might pull their gun a lot, but bullets are never coming out. If every police officer in every book we read killed as many people as they're really killing in our books, they'd be off the streets. Okay, they really would. They would not have a job, or they should not have a job. And I think, you know, we're seeing that here in 2020. So
fair enough. I'd like to do one more question before we move into the audience questions. And that's, is there anything, any subject or experience that you won't write about that you've run across? Frankie, let's start with you.
Well, it's not something I run across. It's just something I would have a hard time writing about. I don't think I would write about a serial killer because I have had a book, I take that back, where someone had done something that turned out to be serial murder by definition, or a series of killings by definition, but wasn't the serial killer out of a horror movie kind of thing. I just don't want to write that, not because I think it's bad if you were able to do it, but it's not, I wouldn't want that in my head. There's some things I just don't want in my head. And so having my police officer on the track of a serial killer would kind of freak me out.
I get that. Marianne.
I think probably the one thing that I would have the most trouble with is somebody who was a pedophile and all that horrible stuff that can happen to children. In Desperate Season, the last book that I wrote, I do have the children who are dying, but they're dying because they're ingesting this new street drug cheese. But I'm, with the exception of one scene, not really showing it. But other than that, I haven't really dealt with kids being killed or kids being victimized. And even when I used to watch the Law and Order Special Victims Unit, when they did the stuff about kids, it just made me squirm inside. So I don't think I could write about that. I could do serial killers though. Got serial killers down pat.
We have standards. Thank you, Marianne. Terry, how about you? Is there any off-limit subject for you?
Well, I kind of think of my writing as I'm trying to provide some popcorn and an escape for people. So my stuff, I love chase scenes. My next book, I got Jessica hanging off the skid of a helicopter, flying over the Thames in London, heading towards the London Eye. I mean, I think, for me, I don't want to deal with the discomfort that I feel for all of these horrible things that are really out there, which is one reason I really admire police officers and people who've done it, like Robin, is because they face that kind of, discomfort every day. What I hope to deliver to my readers is a rollicking, roller coaster ride that at the end, when they get off, they say, wow, that was fun. I'd like to go again.
Fair enough. Robin, anything off limits for you?
Yes. And somebody, I think it was Bruce in the chat, he was asking, do you ever worry about writing something that might give details away to bad guys so they could be better bad guys? And yes, I do think about that. So I'm very careful about what I put down on the page. If there's something, I still am holding secrets close to my chest, as I'm sure you are, Jim, from 9/11, that, there's just stuff that we are not going to put in a book and let people know, certain things that we were told as law enforcement officers. So absolutely, positively, yes.
I'll just add one more to the list, and there was an experience that happened in prison that I don't think I could write about. One of our fellow officers was stabbed, and we're carrying through the institution on a gurney to get him to the hospital, and we took him down this corridor that's over my shoulder, and just past that is a main dining room, and it was packed with 200 inmates, and we're carrying this gurney with a stabbed officer through the dining room, and the inmates just stood up and cheered. It was deafening, and just that feeling, that gut feeling. I don't think that's something that I'm ready to tackle yet. So
yeah.
That's kind of off limits.
Yeah, I think there's like what you're saying, there's certain emotional things that I still can't tackle. I haven't tackled the postcard between the file cabinet thing, women flat on their backs bed. One day I might. I did have, no, I'm not going to talk about it because it's just, but something happened in real life that was sort of a karma thing for the guy who said that about, where women belong, and which I won't say because it's really, off limits, I think. But
okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Let me pull up some questions we did have from the audience. Hopefully we can get through quite a few of them here. Let's see. Would there be a market for stories about smaller crimes? As a reader, I know I get turned off by the bigger, more sadistic, outlandish villains and plans. We kind of talked about that with Marianne and Frankie. Could a book about a bank robbery or a simple murder be successful in these days of outlandish success? Terry, let me turn that to you.
I think it's all about the characters you wrap around them. I think I answered when I was answering that one in the chat. I have a story that I'm building right now. My granddaughter has Down syndrome. So one of the things that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create a character with Down syndrome who has Sherlock Holmes tendencies. And I have the story that I'm working on where a kid witnesses a bank robbery. And he's the only one that has the the sensitivity to be able to look at the details, to understand who those bank robbers are. So I think that those kind of simple things can work if you inject a fascinating character into them.
Mm-hmm.
Good point. Anyone else want to comment on that?
Dog Day Afternoon.
Dog, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, look at a Florida funny writer. My
Oh,
mind.
Tim Dorsey?
No, before him, but he kind of liked him. Wrote the column, the Sunday column.
Carl Hyacin.
Hyacin. Yes, the audience got it. Thank you, guys. Yeah, Carl Hyacin. He always did this very small world, but he does it well. So, that sort of thing, absolutely. Is there a market for it? The heist, a bank robbery gone awry, and it's all about the characters once again. So, yes.
Well, in giving the reader a good whodunit kind of thing, as long as you can dangle, the different red herrings and you keep the reader guessing, it can be a simpler crime. It doesn't have to be the serial killer or the drug thing or whatever. Just as long as you've got the character and the red herrings, I think it's good to go.
I actually stopped watching the TV show Criminal Minds a few years after it started. It started off great, but then it was like they had to top the serial killer with an even gorier serial killer. Oh, we did that last year. We need them to have kill 100 people now, and put their eyeballs along the fence line, or whatever. I just when these TV shows and these books outgore themselves, I'm checking out.
A question came in from our audience, and it kind of piggybacks on a subject we talked about earlier about women in law enforcement, particularly women of color, perhaps. Do any of you use sensitivity readers when you're writing a character not like you?
I actually, when I developed Angel, my black detective, I have a good friend who's an author, and she happens to be African American, and so I ran a lot of stuff by her as I was writing Open Season. But I also interviewed a young black police officer on the Dallas Police Department, and she had just gotten her detective shield, and she had experienced a lot of the issues that you talked about, Robin, in terms of being a woman, but also being an African American woman. And I love your cat. I had one that almost walked past a little while ago.
It's not my cat.
So, oh, whose cat was that?
Oh, no. That's his thing. Do you have Not My Cat right there, Jim?
Yeah, she just hopped off the desk. She was here.
No, I mean the one that you take to the voucher cons.
Oh yeah, it's here.
You should need to put it on screen.
I'll go get it while you're finishing this question.
Thank you. Yeah, everybody knows Not My Cat. Have they been to in-person voucher con? Anyways, what were we talking about? Sorry.
Well, I was talking about how I ran the Angel, my black.
Oh, that's right. Sensitivity readers.
Yeah, past my friend and past this young police officer that I interviewed, and I kept going back to the police officer because Angel is her basically. But I kept going back to that officer to say, is this right? Is this, even though it's not exactly what you would do, is it something close enough to what you would do that it's real for you and for this character? And I counted on getting that. So I made sure that Angel was a true person.
Very good. We're running close to time. If each of you could just take a minute and tell us what's coming up next for you, and what's your current work and what we need to look forward to next. Robin, let's start with you.
Well, I'm working on the next Clive Cussler, Sam and Remy book. This Wrath of Poseidon just came out a few months ago. And then for anybody who's interested in police procedurals, you could check out face of a killer. She's FBI agent, police procedural, forensic artist, sort of a thing. But at the moment, that's what I'm working on.
Thanks, Robin. Terry.
Well, Jessica's going to London. That's where she's headed next. And hopefully that one will be done first quarter next year. I am mired in the COVID-19 stuff right now with this mystery bug thing. And I have another investigative series that I'm working on for kids where we have these temporal historians that are actually in elementary school that go backwards in time to great, amazing robberies to try and understand how they happened and how they could be prevented.
Very nice. Frankie, what's coming up for you?
Yeah, my Lizzie's Stewart series, the 5 books, actually stopped in 2011. And so now they're being reissued. The 3rd in the 5 is coming out shortly. And I'm working on the 6th. And now they're actually set in the past in 2004 because I wrote so slowly and then there was that lapse. So I have some leeway there with what I'm doing. I'm also working on a 1939 historical thriller that I've been working on for years, but it's coming eventually.
Sounds good. Marianne.
I'm working on the 4th book in the season series. It's called Brutal Season. And as I mentioned earlier, I got a lot of the current issues in it, police brutality and the protests. But I'm also working on a nonfiction book. I've been a journalist. That was kind of my background, well, that and being a mom, before I started writing the mysteries. And I'm working on a nonfiction book based on my experience as a hospital chaplain, and it's called The Many Faces of Grief. And I actually started writing a blog called The Many Faces of Grief when I was doing my first suspense book, One Small Victory, and that has a lot of grief issues in it. So my publisher said, let's do something to kind of create some reader interest in One Small Victory. So I did that blog. And so that's been an interesting thing to do when my brain can't work with the social issues right now. I kind of go over to the nonfiction book.
What about you, Jim?
Let's see. The most recent book out is Bury the Past, set in Sacramento, and I've got a new book coming out in July called Black Label from Level Best Books. So I'm looking forward to that release and getting that off the ground. I really want to thank all of you for taking the time to make this panel. I think we had a fun time. I could have gone all day. This was a blast.
Yeah, it was. Thank
so
you, Jim.
I really appreciate it. And you all brought a different perspective to it. And I really thank you for it. And,
thank you very much.
We're getting all kinds of comments back from the audience saying they enjoyed it too. So
yeah, it was fun. It was
a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you everybody for coming. It was great. And thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Robin. Take care, everyone. Stay safe. We'll see you again soon. Hopefully in person. Bye.
Bye.
Not my